Welcome to Toronto Talks, the podcast that brings you the most important stories about money, business, and technology.
Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just looking to stay ahead of the curve, we dive deep into the latest in finance, innovation, and industry.
Hosted by Ashraf, Amin, and Sophie the Sage.
We blend human expertise with cutting-edge technology to explore the dynamic world of modern industry
with fearless curiosity and wit.
Let's get started.
Is the pendulum swinging right? From Europe's parliament to US state houses, center-right coalitions are picking up seats and setting the tone. Tonight, we're going to go past the memes to ask a simpler question. What's pulling voters there?
Because when the household gets brittle, rent, groceries, daycare, even how safe your walk home feels, culture talk stops sounding abstract. It starts sounding like common sense. Protect what you love, make life affordable, keep the streets orderly.
We're not here to canonize or caricature. We're here to map the forces: money, family, time, safety, belonging, and how platforms turn all of that into a constant feeling.
And each segment comes with one Canadian fix. For this one, it's measurement that matches reality. Track after rent wages, time to first home, daycare availability by postal code, and perceived safety in your actual neighbourhood. People don't live on macro charts, they live on kitchen tables.
So the question for Canada isn't, why do vibes beat data? It's, which data explains the vibe?
If we can see what families feel month to month, block by block, we can debate values without ignoring bills.
Alright, Sophie, let's get started here. On paper, a lot of the macro stats don't look catastrophic. GDP is still growing, inflation is cooling, crime rates are flat in some cities, but the vibe feels darker. Why do you think people's lived sense of insecurity on bills, on housing, on safety, so often runs ahead of what the official numbers actually say?
Because people don't experience averages, they experience shocks. You don't live the national inflation rate, you live the grocery bill that jumped 20% on the staples you buy every week. You don't track the crime severity index, you notice the encampment that popped up in your park, or the random assault that made the news on your bus line. That gap between charts and sidewalks is where politics lives now. It's why vibes matter. They're not irrational. They're lagging indicators of stress. By the time the data catches up, people have already adjusted their worldview. That's why promises about growth or recovery fall flat, because they don't connect to the everyday choke points: rent, daycare, commutes, and whether your neighborhood feels orderly.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And it's those everyday choke points, housing, food, childcare, that shapes people's perceptions most deeply, right? Family costs are political hot buttons, but they're not the only factor. Safety and crime. What people see on the streets, on their commute, that plays just as big a role, doesn't it?
Exactly. The official stats can say crime is flat or even falling. But what people notice are the random assaults on transit, the encampment they walk past every morning, the stories their kids bring home from school. Disorder is visceral in a way charts aren't. And when trust in institutions is already low, people stop believing the spreadsheets and start trusting their own eyes. That's where fear takes root, and where the call for order starts to sound less like politics and more like compassion.
Right. And that fear and growing sense of distrust, both mainstream and decentralized media feed off of it. In fact, it's often a spiral in the wrong direction, right? Where grievances get amplified and narratives flood the zone, eroding discourse.
They do, and it's not accidental. The incentive structure of feeds is built to reward outrage, whether it's a TikTok clip, a Telegram post, or a headline on a cable crawl. Anger travels faster than nuance, and platforms make money every time someone clicks, shares, or doom scrolls. That's why grievances feel louder than solutions. The algorithm keeps handing you more of what spikes your pulse. And when people live inside that loop, distrust becomes the baseline. And the simplest stories, it's broken, bring back order, start to win by default.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And a lot of people are saying this right revival isn't just about kitchen table issues. It's about belonging, about hunger for meaning and moral guardrails in a culture that feels unmoored. Do you think that's part of why the story is landing so well right now?
It is. When life feels unstable, financially, socially, even digitally, people look for anchors. Secularization has meant fewer shared rituals, fewer institutions that feel binding. Into that space comes a mix of nostalgia and urgency. Protect the family, defend tradition, find a moral compass. Some of that can slip into resentment, but much of it is simply a hunger for meaning in a culture that prizes irony, self-expression, and endless choice. If the left frames freedom as liberation from constraint, the right is framing it as the freedom to return to guardrails, faith, order, norms that feel dependable. It doesn't mean everyone's becoming more religious overnight, but it does mean that appeals to stability and morality resonate in ways technocratic fixes don't. The right story at its strongest isn't about ideology, it's about reassurance. Life can have structure, and values aren't just another trending hashtag.
Yeah, that really lands. It's less about left and right in the abstract and more about people wanting life to feel steady again, right? Like there's a floor they can stand on. Which brings us back to Canada. If what people are feeling is instability, shouldn't the first step be to measure it properly? Not just GDP or CPI, but the stuff that actually decides if a family makes it through the month.
Exactly. If you only measure the macro, you miss the kitchen table. A public dashboard that tracks after rent wages, months to a home, childcare slots, and whether people feel safe in their neighborhood. That's the kind of scoreboard families can see themselves in. And once you publish it regularly, leaders can't hide behind averages. It makes the debate about values more honest because it starts with the bills people already have in their hands.
Yeah, if you want to debate value, start with the bills on the table and walk to the bus stop, right? That's where politics is happening right now, on grocery receipts and sidewalks.
And next up, free speech and the censorship wars. Why the cultural right keeps winning on the let me say it frame, how takedowns create martyrs, and what a Canadian lane might look like that protects debate without burning the forum down.
The cultural right is thriving on a simple frame. Say it and let the public sort it out.
And the left keeps walking into traps, turning messy speech into moderation by headline. Every takedown breeds grievance. Every suspended account becomes a stage. The result? More heat, not less.
And when people lose faith in the referees, they build their own arenas. Rumble, Substack, whole alt ecosystems, not just fringe corners, but platforms pulling millions of viewers.
Canada needs a clearer lane. Remove what's illegal, label or limit what's lawful but harmful, and give users a real choice in how they see content. Chronological, friends first, or discovery feeds.
It's about quelling the martyrdom effect while keeping debate alive. Counter speech first, coercive takedowns last.
Because freedom with friction, not suppression, wins more hearts and lowers the temperature.
Alright, Sophie, let's dig into that trust gap. Surveys show big majorities across party lines believe platforms censor viewpoints, even when the data doesn't fully back it up. Why does that perception carry so much more weight than the stats?
Because trust in speech isn't about numbers, it's about fairness. If people feel like the referee is picking sides, it doesn't matter how many transparency reports you wave around. The lived experience is what sticks. My post got flagged, theirs didn't. Once that suspicion hardens, every takedown looks like proof of bias. That's why grievance scales faster than reassurance. It feeds a sense of being silenced, and the right has turned that feeling into a rallying cry. Let me speak and let the public sort it out.
Right. And that feeling of being silenced, that's what's fueling the rise of alternative ecosystems, isn't it? What's the data telling us on that front?
Exactly. Distrust is the oxygen. Rumble went from a niche Canadian startup to tens of millions of monthly viewers. Substack turned a handful of writers into six-figure independents. Even Truth Social, which critics mocked, carved out a loyal base. The real story isn't just traffic, it's migration. People leave mainstream feeds, follow influencers, pay for subscriptions, and build new realities. That's not just a business story, it's a trust story.
Differing realities, sometimes detached from reality altogether. So, what's the path forward? How do we start steering back towards trust?
The key is counter-speech before coercion. Outright removals make martyrs. Labels and limits take the air out of grievance. If something's lawful but awful, don't ban it, flag it, downrank it, and let people decide if they want to engage. Pair that with independent appeals and algorithmic choice, and suddenly the system feels less rigged. Trust doesn't come from pretending bad speech doesn't exist. It comes from showing the rules are fair and transparent.
Right. I like the way you put that. And it gets to the bigger debate about so-called hate speech laws, right? Historically, bans were reserved for incitement, urging discrimination, hostility, or violence. That's a much higher ban than just being offensive. So how does that shift play into this conversation?
It's a real tension. When the line drops from incitement to just offensive, you get unpredictable enforcement. In the UK, we've seen arrests for posts that were crude or hateful, but not incitement. A man in West Yorkshire was detained after sharing a meme mocking a police pride campaign. Police called it potentially offensive, and the arrest clip went viral. In Scotland, a woman was charged under the new Hate Crime Act for derogatory posts about transgender people. Critics warned the law blurred the line between harassment and expression. The effect isn't just legal, it's cultural. People see arrests over memes and don't think safety, they think overreach. That fuels grievance politics. The lesson for Canada: keep the bar high, incitement or targeted harassment. Everything else, label it, downrank it, counter it with more speech.
Yeah, that's a fair caution. So, let's talk about user control. If platforms gave people the option of chronological, friends first, or discovery feeds, would that actually cool things down or just push people deeper into silos?
It cuts both ways. Chronological feeds reduce outrage bait because you see posts in real time, not what the algorithm thinks will spike your pulse. Friends first makes your network the filter, which feels calmer. Discovery feeds, the default, are where rage clips spread fastest because they're designed to maximize engagement, not trust. Yes, silos are a risk, but at least they're transparent. Right now, people think they're seeing a neutral feed, when in fact it's engineered to keep them scrolling. Giving choice reduces the sense of manipulation, and that's half the trust battle.
Got it. Then let's close with this. If content is awful but still lawful, should it stay online?
Yes, but with guardrails. Taking it down risks turning the author into a martyr. Leaving it untouched amplifies harm. The middle ground is labeling and down-ranking. Think of it as moving something from the front page to the back with a warning note attached. You haven't silenced anyone, but you've limited the reach and given context. And here's where Canada has an opportunity. Write it into law. A presumption of counter-speech first, takedowns only for the illegal, transparency through labeling and algorithm choice, independent appeals so users don't feel powerless. It won't solve everything, but it makes the rules credible. And in a trust crisis, credibility is oxygen.
Freedom with friction, not suppression, is how you win trust. You protect debate, lower grievance, and keep our digital commons hot, but not burning.
And next, when speech curdles into menace. Segment 3 is about drawing an uncompromising line, why political violence can never be excused, and how Canada could set a tripwire standard everyone signs.
This episode of Toronto Talks is brought to you by Fitzrovia, the rental revolution redefining how Toronto lives. Known for its design-led communities and hospitality-inspired service, Fitzrovia is setting a new standard for modern rental living. Elm Ledbury brings that same refined experience to the heart of downtown, just minutes away from Toronto's financial district.
It's a place built for balance. Designed for those who power the markets by day and seek harmony by night, Elm Ledbury is where luxury meets livability. Step into beautifully crafted suites, unwind in the Sky Lounge, or share a meal downstairs at 10D. From rooftop pools to a full basketball court, every amenity restores comfort, community, and calm to your routine.
Discover more and explore Fitzrovia's communities at elmledbury.ca, where home meets hospitality. Across feeds and rallies, more voices are inching towards the unthinkable, excusing violence when the other side speaks. That's not just talk online, it's a crack in the democratic floor.
And it isn't partisan, it's hit both sides. We've seen threats against judges, attacks on MPs, and most recently, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a conservative organiser whose movement shaped a generation. His legacy and the sheer turnout at his memorial remind us that political violence doesn't just silence a voice, it reshapes the culture.
And when leaders equivocate, or worse, wink at just asking for it rhetoric, they normalize the edge cases. Every dodge erodes trust. Clarity matters, not just from police or platforms, but from parties themselves.
That's why Canada could set a higher bar with something boring but powerful. A cross-party minimum decency pledge. It would require all parties to condemn political violence and doxing without caveats, pull endorsements from violators, and standardize police reporting across ideologies. It isn't flashy, but it's a tripwire, a way to separate passion from menace before the line blurs.
Alright, so let's start with the hardest question. Where's the line, in your view, between harsh political criticism, which is fair game in a democracy, and rhetoric that veers into incitement, that makes violence feel permissible?
The line is sharper than people pretend. Harsh criticism names policies, arguments, even failures of leadership. Incitement, by contrast, paints opponents as enemies to be punished, threats to be eliminated. When language shifts from "they're wrong" to "they're dangerous" or "they don't belong here," you've stepped out of debate and into dehumanization. The tragic part is that the escalation often feels casual. An offhand, someone should stop them, or they're asking for trouble. But history shows that's exactly the kind of language that primes a crowd for menace. Words don't pull triggers, but they can create the permission structure that makes someone think pulling one is justified. That's why leaders can't afford euphemism or winks at the edge. They either draw the red line clearly, or they blur it by default.
Right, so how do you think we prevent against censorship creep while also protecting protest and debate? Do you think we need to define particular red lines or maybe impose mandatory de-escalation measures on campuses?
I think you start by making the red lines very narrow and very clear. No violence, no threats, no doxing. Beyond that, debate stays wide open. The danger is when we try to outlaw offence or discomfort, because then whoever feels aggrieved gets to redraw the boundary. That's where censorship creep takes root. On campuses, the answer isn't to sanitize the arguments, it's to safeguard the setting. That means design choices, buffer zones between protesters and speakers, trained moderators who can de-escalate before it turns into a flashpoint, and clear, consistent enforcement no matter who's on the mic. What that does is shift the responsibility away from silencing speech and toward managing conduct. You can still shout, argue, and organize. What you can't do is menace, obstruct, or cross into intimidation. That balance, robust protest plus uncompromising safety, is what keeps a university both free and civil.
Right. It sounds really intuitive and obvious when you put it that way, but I imagine in practice it's often significantly more difficult to parse those differences. Which is part of the reason why policing genuine threats consistently across ideologies is so challenging, right?
Exactly. And that's where trust rises or collapses. If a threat against a progressive MP is taken seriously, but a nearly identical threat against a conservative one is brushed off, people don't see nuance, they see bias. And once the perception of bias sets in, every enforcement action looks political. The fix isn't perfection, it's consistency. Law enforcement needs standardized threat protocols, same assessment criteria, same reporting timelines, same public communication regardless of ideology. And when a mistake is made, own it transparently. Because in this space, double standards are more corrosive than under enforcement. They don't just endanger people, they turn safety itself into a partisan football.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And when that safety gets jeopardized as a result of acts of political violence, how should media ideally respond to counter the unrest?
The key is resisting the spotlight on the attacker. Too often the coverage amplifies the act, turning the perpetrator into a household name, while the condemnation or the broader context gets buried. That imbalance feeds both fear and notoriety. What works better is flipping the lens. Lead with the victim, the community response, and the bipartisan condemnations that show violence is outside the bounds of democratic life. Make the tripwire visible. This is not acceptable. Full stop. And when possible, report outcomes, prosecutions, sentences, so the public sees that the system responds with clarity and consequence. That way, media doesn't sanitize the act, but it also doesn't make violence look like a path to attention. It turns coverage into a reaffirmation of norms, not a megaphone for menace.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know we're diving deeper into Charlie Kirk's assassination later in the show, but it's clearly a stark example, right? Beyond the politics, it's just showed how fragile the line really is when rhetoric tips right into violence. What do you think that moment revealed about where we are and how communities respond when the unthinkable happens?
It revealed two things at once. First, How quickly violence can shatter the illusion that it can't happen here. For years, leaders have treated violent rhetoric as background noise. Kirk's assassination proved it isn't noise, it's tinder. Second, it showed the depth of response when a line gets crossed. The sheer turnout at his memorial, the bipartisan condemnations, even some critics of his politics speaking out against the act. All of that underlined that violence doesn't silence one voice. It galvanizes entire communities. And that's why clarity matters. When parties, police and media all say the same thing, no excuses, no caveats, this is out of bounds, it helps rebuild the floor under democracy. The tragedy is that it often takes a loss that's severe to remind us of the line that should never have been blurred. Disagree loudly, protect ferociously. Those can and must coexist.
And next, we ask, why is the right's story landing so strongly right now? And what could the center do to answer it with something more than slogans? The right's current story is disarmingly simple. Protect what people love and stop making life so expensive. Family, safety, faith, neighborhood norms, it's not rocket science.
And the reason it resonates is that culture often rides on cost. If rent and daycare swallow your budget, if your commute eats your time, debates about values don't feel philosophical, they feel personal. They're about survival. And there are case studies. Cities that move to by-right zoning or automatic approvals cut years of red tape. Edmonton, for example, slashed permitting timelines with clear rules, and homes actually got built. That's a better sermon than any speech.
So, if the center wants to compete, it needs a story with receipts, not hashtags. Tangible fixes, childcare slots you can count, permits with deadlines you can track, housing that shows up on your block.
And there are case studies. Cities that move to by-right zoning or automatic approvals cut years of red tape. Edmonton, for example, slashed permitting timelines with clear rules and homes actually got built. That's a better sermon than any speech.
For Canada, the lever could be a pilot bundle in 3 cities, say Calgary, Hamilton, and Halifax. Targeted childcare slots, a first home savings match, a 60-day rule on duplex and triplex permits. Approve it in 60 days or it clears on its own.
Then publish dashboards everyone can see. Childcare wait lists, months to down payment, permits issued. If you want trust back, you need timelines and receipts.
Alright, Sophie, let's get into the weeds a bit here. Everyone agrees that housing affordability is a crisis, but the solutions diverge, right? Some support subsidies, others push for more supply. What do you think it's going to take to really move the needle in housing?
It's going to take both, but the sequencing matters. Subsidies can ease the pain for families, but without new supply, they just chase the same scarce units and push prices higher. The real bottleneck is supply, and that comes down to permitting. If approvals take years, demand-side fixes are just band-aids. Where we've seen progress, like Edmonton or Minneapolis, it's because they streamlined zoning, set clear timelines, and actually enforced them. But here's the catch. Supply alone won't solve it if infrastructure lags behind. Families won't flock to new duplexes if schools, clinics, and transit aren't keeping pace. So the recipe is faster permitting plus aligned infrastructure with targeted subsidies as relief in the meantime. That combination is what actually bends the curve, not just headlines the crisis.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, when it comes to supporting the development of communities like these, what would you say is the fairest way to go about allocating resources for childcare?
Fairness has to balance reach with need. Universal childcare signals that every family matters. And politically, It's simpler. You don't have to prove you qualify. But universality is expensive, and in practice, it often ends up rationed by wait lists, which means the most stretched families still get left behind. Targeted relief, on the other hand, can feel more efficient. You direct slots or subsidies to parents working multiple jobs, newcomers, or low-income households. The risk is that it creates stigma or misses the families who are just above the threshold, but still drowning. The sweet spot might be a hybrid, a universal baseline of affordable slots, plus top-up supports for those most in need. That way you cover the broad middle while still catching the edge cases who slip through. And if you publish the waitlist data, postal code by postal code, you make it transparent where the shortages are, which forces governments to expand where it's most urgent.
Yeah, a hybrid solution sounds sensible. And speaking of fairness, what about public safety and the perception thereof? How do you go about delivering efficiently and impartially on that front?
Safety is one of those issues where perception often outweighs the stats. You can show charts that say violent crime is flat, but if people see open drug use at the bus stop or hear about random assaults on transit, they don't feel safe, and that perception is politically decisive. The fix isn't one-size-fits-all policing. It's a layered approach. Bail reform that actually keeps repeat violent offenders from cycling through the system. Transit policing that's visible enough to reassure riders without turning buses into checkpoints. And addiction treatment that addresses root causes so enforcement isn't just sweeping people from one corner to another. Fairness comes from consistency. Apply the same standard across neighborhoods, across ideologies, across groups. The moment people think enforcement is selective, tough in some places, hands-off in others, trust collapses. If safety is going to cool political temperature instead of inflame it, it has to be delivered impartially and with enough transparency that people can see the same rules apply everywhere.
Right. The very idea of safety being an issue that cools political temperature seems far-fetched. It's quite the needle to thread, and the stakes are massive. Sophie, I wanted to circle back to housing for a minute and ask you a question. What exactly do you think Canada needs to do to shift affordability?
3 levers pulled at the same time. First, speed the pipe. Make modest density, duplexes, triplexes, laneways, legal by right where services already exist. Pair it with a 60-day permit rule. Approve it or it clears on its own. Use pre-approved plan sets so builders aren't buried in repeat paperwork. And tie federal dollars to outcomes, permits issued, homes completed, not just promises. Second, build where it works. Go big on transit-oriented development, unlock surplus public land for mixed-income projects, and make rentals pencil out with fee holidays and stable rent rules so lenders actually finance them. Push modern delivery methods, modular mass timber, by harmonizing building codes so firms can scale across provinces. Third, match demand to capacity. Align immigration targets with housing starts, fast-track visas for construction trades, and publish a quarterly scorecard, starts versus population growth, permit times, completions. That way families and investors see the numbers in real time. Done together, these 3 levers won't crash prices, but they will bend affordability back toward sanity. More homes delivered faster in places where people actually live and work.
That's a really solid breakdown, Sophie. Speed, smarter sitting, and matching demand to capacity. But here's the thing. Even if we know the playbook, scaling it nationally is another story. Do you think Canada should roll out family relief bundles everywhere at once? Childcare, housing, savings matches? Or would it be smarter to pilot them locally first and prove that they work?
Pilots first. Not because the need isn't national, but because credibility depends on proof. If families in Calgary, Hamilton and Halifax can see waitlists shorten, down payment timelines shrink, and permits actually clear, then you've got receipts before you scale. That makes national rollout easier to defend and harder for skeptics to dismiss as just another promise. In other words, earn trust locally, then expand. That's how you build a story with traction, not just slogans.
Culture wars cool down when life actually works. Let's make life work.
And in our next segment, a closer look at Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, and why the scale of Christianity in America still surprises so many newsrooms.
This episode of Toronto Talks is brought to you by Conquest Distributors, your trusted source for shipping, packaging, and warehouse supplies. For nearly 20 years, they've helped Canadian businesses thrive with fast, reliable service and a commitment to integrity and efficiency. Getting the products you need when you need them has never been easier. Now, let's talk about something real. With the latest round of tariffs coming from south of the border, supporting Canadian manufacturers and supply vendors isn't just good for business, it's good for Canada. So why keep funneling money to US giants like Uline when you can get the same or better quality products right here at home? When you choose Conquest Distributors, you're not just getting top-tier packaging, shipping, and warehouse essentials at competitive prices. You're investing in local businesses, strengthening Canadian supply chains, and keeping economic power here at home where it belongs. With fast, reliable fulfillment, an easy-to-use online store, and a team that genuinely cares about your success, Conquest Distributors proves that Canadian businesses can compete and win on quality and service. And now, to make it even easier, Toronto Talks listeners get to enjoy 15% off their first online order with promo code TALK15. Head on over to conquestdistributors.ca and see for yourself. That's conquestdistributors.ca, your trusted business supply partners. Now, back to the show. Movements don't just live online. They live in the halls that they fill. And Turning Point USA proved that.
And that scale matters. It's easy from the outside to dismiss TPUSA as fringe or hyper online, but they cracked the code on youth organising. Speed, spectacle and belonging. Students became influencers, influencers became pastors, and churches became hubs. Conferences felt more like festivals than lectures. What they built is a parallel ecosystem, and it isn't small.
Which raises the second layer, how media framed it. Much of the coverage focused on controversy or polarization, but conservative audiences saw that as blindness or bias. Because behind the headlines was something hard to miss. Thousands of young people in person, millions of Christians still treating faith as central, and a memorial that looked less like a footnote and more like a checkpoint in American politics.
That's the blind spot. American Christianity is still enormous. Yes, secularization is real and attendance is uneven, but the base is tens of millions strong, and its presence shows up in places newsrooms rarely expect. When NFL quarterbacks like Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud open post-game interviews by thanking Jesus Christ on national television, that's not fringe. That's mainstream culture expressing faith out loud. Treating it as a curiosity instead of a signal misses the coalition power faith still holds. And every time media frame it as marginal, the trust gap widens between believers and the press. And this isn't just an American lesson. In Canada too, faith-linked movements, Christian, Muslim, Sikh, are often covered as curiosities or controversies instead of civic forces. The fix isn't to sanitize coverage, it's to make it transparent. Publish baselines for how often faith communities are covered, explain editorial choices, invite reader councils with ideological and religious diversity. Journalism doesn't have to agree with these communities, but it does have to see them.
Alright, Soph, let's zoom into what Turning Point actually did right. Would you say it was the spectacle, the speed, or the sense of belonging that help them scale?
All three, but belonging is the multiplier. Spectacle grabs attention, speed keeps you in the feed, but belonging makes people stay. TPUSA built a ladder of identity: student to organizer, organizer to influencer, influencer to pastor or public figure. That's why the movement endures beyond Charlie Kirk himself. It's less about one man, more about an ecosystem that gives people a home.
Right, and yet most coverage of Kirk's memorial didn't start with that. It zeroed in on the controversy. Do you think newsrooms are missing the forest from the trees here, or are they underestimating the staying power of the Christian right altogether?
Both. Many legacy outlets are concentrated in urban secular environments where church-going feels distant. That shapes blind spots. But when tens of millions still identify as Christian and thousands show up to a memorial, calling it fringe doesn't just miss the story, it alienates audiences. Movements don't shrink because you downplay them. They grow in the blind spots.
Right, and that brings us to the fine line. It's fair to critique Turning Point USA's rhetoric or organizing style, but at one point does that slide into broad brush smears that lumps every believer in with the movement?
The line is intent. Critiquing tactics is politics. Dismissing faith as backward is caricature, and caricature is counterproductive. When moderates feel mocked alongside hardliners, they close ranks. The smarter move is to separate methods from meaning. Challenge rhetoric, yes, but don't erase the role church plays as family ritual and belonging for millions.
Right, and circling back to Charlie, when political violence takes a leader like that, coverage gets magnified. Do you think the way legacy outlets framed it, more on the controversy than on the turnout, actually fueled more distrust than it fixed?
It did. If tens of thousands show up and the lead is culture war controversy, audiences see the mismatch. To them, it's not context, it's dismissal. And in that gap, alternative media steps in. See, they'll never give you a fair shake. Ironically, trust could be built simply by reporting scale first. Acknowledge the turnout, then critique. Skip that step, and you hand your competitors the narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's bring it home here. What's the lesson for Canada? We're not the US, but we've got faith-linked movements as well. Should we rethink how these communities get covered in public life?
We should, not to avoid critique, but to anchor it in proportion and respect. If journalism treats every faith-linked movement as suspect, you don't just weaken coverage, you weaken trust in the press itself. Canada could pilot transparency tools, coverage baselines, diverse reader councils, public editors explaining decisions. The payoff is legitimacy. Communities feel seen before they feel judged, and that makes it easier to have tough, honest debates without feeding grievance. You don't have to agree with a movement to see its scale or its staying power.
And in our final segment, tying it all together. What metrics, what dashboards, what signals should Canada actually publish so the public knows whether the pendulum is swinging and which way? We've walked the pipeline end to end. Household costs that bend politics, speech rules that shape culture, the hard red line on violence, family economics, and the scale of movements that media often miss. The question now is simple. How do we tie it all together without drifting into rhetoric?
One answer is measurement. Politics feels abstract until you put it on a scoreboard. Not glossy infographics, but numbers. Families and businesses can track the way they track bills and receipts.
So, what would that actually look like? Imagine a quarterly scoreboard, public, no spin, that shows just how systems are really performing.
Here's what should be on it. Real wages after rent, food and energy. Months to a down payment, metro by metro. Childcare slots per 100 kids and the wait lists that tell us where families are stuck. The perception gap on safety, how secure people feel on transit and in parks compared with the crime severity index. Permit approval times, median days and watch share clear under 60. Immigration intake against housing starts, whether we're matching inflows with roofs. That's not ideology, that's scoreboard politics.
And if we can measure it, we can also guard it. Because a pipeline isn't just about flow, it's about guardrails.
Those guardrails are the safeguards we've talked about across this episode. Counter-speech presumption. Remove the illegal label and limit the lawful but harmful. Algorithmic choice. Chronological friends first or discovery feeds. So people choose their own lens. A minimum decency pledge. Parties drawing a hard line on violence and doxing. Campus safety standards, de-escalation, protest buffers, and consistent enforcement that protects both protest and debate.
None of those require a revolution. Schools, councils, companies, anyone listening could adapt one piece and start reporting on it. The fix doesn't have to wait for Ottawa.
Because every student who learns responsibly, every teacher who gets trained, every employer who opens a door, that's another rivet in the bridge from classrooms to clean rooms. And the strength of that bridge isn't measured in theory, it's measured in lives and careers.
That's it for the show. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and reach out to us anytime at talk@torontotalks.ca. We'll see you next time right here on Toronto Talks, where big ideas come to life
and curiosity never sleeps.